I was unlocking the front door of my own cabin around 2 a.m. when my phone lit up a call from a woman I didn't even know, accusing me of breaking into what was, quite literally, my own house. Just 10 minutes after that bizarre conversation, the police showed up. That's when things really took a strange turn. At first, I figured she was just another overly involved hoe type with too much time on her hands. But the way she watched me, it was unsettling. Have you ever had a neighbor act like they were guarding a top-secret government site? Share your oddest hoe encounters in the comments. I read every single one. You're watching a drama nest, and even now, this experience still makes my skin crawl. The drive from Sacramento to my cabin in the mountains normally takes about 4 hours, but that night it felt like an eternity. I'm Lucas Sterling, 35, and I handle cybersecurity for a federal agency. The past 6 months, an absolute grind. I was troubleshooting high-level systems, surviving on caffeine and grit, and running on fumes. All I wanted was a hot shower and a solid 12 hours of sleep. The cabin's in a quiet lakeside community, maybe 20 houses tucked in among the trees. The kind of neighborhood where you'd expect people to wave hello, maybe offer you some baked goods. Boot to broken bar. Well, this wasn't that kind of night. I pulled into the driveway right at 2 a.m. My headlights swept across the familiar cabin, just the way I'd left it half a year ago. I slipped my key into the lock, and just as it clicked open, my phone rang. Unknown caller. I hesitated, but something told me to answer. Hello, I said, fumbling with the keys. Her voice? Like fingernails on a chalkboard, with the charm of a scolding voicemail. Harsh, aggressive, and completely unexpected. Who are you? Why are you arriving at this hour? I actually had to pull the phone away from my ear. Sorry, who is this? I asked, confused. This is Denise Harrow, president of the HOA, she snapped. You're breaking quiet hours. I've been watching you. This behavior doesn't belong in our community. I stood there, key in hand, stunned. She was actually policing when I could enter my own house. I tried to keep it cool. Ma'am, I apologize if I caused concern. My name's Lucas Sterling. I own this cabin. I've just returned from a work assignment. But she cut me off. I've never seen you here before. Prove it. I was literally standing on my front porch with my key in the lock, and a complete stranger was demanding proof that I belonged there. I understand your concern, I said calmly, but I'm the legal owner of this property. I work for the federal government, and my job involves irregular hours and travel. Silence. For a second, I thought she'd settled down, but I was wrong. I don't care who you say you work for, she barked. This is a quiet neighborhood. We don't tolerate anything suspicious. You could be anyone, a thief, a criminal. I'm calling the police. I glanced down at myself. Sweatpants, duffel bag, definitely not dressed like someone staging a heist. And then she hung up. I stared at my phone, half convinced I'd stepped into some twisted alternate reality. Was she paranoid or just power tripping? Either way, something about her tone wasn't just cautious, it was confrontational. 10 minutes later, I was inside digging through my suitcase for a towel when the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. 2 cops stood on my porch, looking about as thrilled as I felt. They had the tired expressions of men who'd been pulled away from real emergencies for something ridiculous. I opened the door, but before I could say anything, someone stepped into the porch light. A woman in her 50s, dressed in a silky red robe and slippers, marched up the path like she owned the street. No doubt, this was Denise Harrow, and she was smirking like she'd just caught a criminal. Officers, thank you for responding so quickly, she said sweetly, in that fake concerned tone. This man claims to own the property, but he arrived at a suspicious hour. With all the recent burglaries, I had to report it. He might be dangerous. I almost laughed. But the officers were just doing their jobs, so I kept things respectful. Gentlemen, I'm Lucas Sterling. This is my property. I just returned from a work trip. One of the officers, the younger one, gave me a look that said he dealt with neighborhood busybodies before. Sir, we just need to confirm your ID, then we'll be out of your hair. Do you have identification? Here's where things got interesting. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my federal ID, not a driver's license, not a credit card, the real deal. The flashlight beam hit it, and the entire mood shifted. Both officers straightened up, Their relaxed posture vanished in a flash. "Apologies, sir, we weren't aware," the older one began. I waved him off. "No problem, officers. I know you're just doing your job. I respect the commitment to safety." But it was Denise's face that said everything. Just moments before, she'd been standing there like she was about to witness a takedown. Now, her face went pale, her smug grin evaporated. I turned to her directly. "Ma'am," I said, "I'm Lucas Sterling. I'm the legal owner of this lakeside cabin," I explained calmly. "I work in computer security for the federal government. My job often has me traveling during odd hours, but I assure you I have every right to be here." The officers apologized again, nodded respectfully, and turned to head back to their cruiser. But Denise didn't move. She stood there, completely frozen. Not the kind of awkward frozen you get when you're caught in the wrong anno. This was something different. It was fear, plain and sharp. She stared at me like I'd pulled out a weapon instead of an ID badge. I couldn't make sense of it, or maybe I could, but didn't want to admit it yet. I'd just proven I was exactly who I said I was. This whole drama should have ended, but the look on her face told me it hadn't. Not even close. The officers drove off into the night. I locked the door behind me, thinking the situation was done and over. But when I glanced out the window, there she was, still in the middle of the street, wrapped in that ridiculous red robe, unmoving, just standing there, watching my cabin like she expected something to crawl out of it. I thought showing her my credentials would close the book, but that cold expression told me otherwise. This wasn't the end, this was just chapter 1, and I had no clue what I was stepping into. The next morning, I woke up to 17 emails, 17, all from the same address, denise.hero.ho@mountainlake.com. Not even kidding. This woman had spent her night typing up every violation she could possibly invent. Violation notice number 1. Vehicle parked 2.3 feet from curb. A regulation states 2.5 feet. I had to read it twice. She literally measured the distance from my tire to the curb and found a difference of 0.2 feet. Who owns a curb ruler? Who even thinks to check that? And it didn't stop there. Violation notice number 2. Exterior lighting exceeds acceptable brightness for local mountain environment preservation. She was talking about my porch light, a basic, off-the-shelf fixture from Home Depot. Apparently, too intense for the delicate alpine vibe she was curating. Then came violation notice number 3. Lawn maintenance does not meet whole landscaping standards. Grass height inconsistent with approved community appearance. I laughed out loud at that one. It was February. The lawn was under a blanket of snow. What grass? At that point, I stopped wondering if she was just strict and started thinking maybe something was genuinely wrong. Either that, or she was trying to reassert control after what happened the night before. By the 12th email, I counted, I realized it wasn't about community standards. It was about power. Urgent. Unauthorized surveillance equipment detected on premises. Remove immediately or face legal consequence. That one stood out. The others were petty. This one felt scared. There was no surveillance equipment, no cameras, no sensors, not even a doorbell cam, unless she was mistaking the pine tree near the porch for a spy drone. There was nothing watching her. But that message, it wasn't for my benefit. It was fear-driven. Why would she think I was watching her? What could she be doing that made her feel watched in the first place? I needed to clear my head. So I stepped outside for a walk through the neighborhood, part curiosity, part escape. It was peaceful, quiet, way too quiet. Given all the drama unfolding, I was admiring the frozen lake when a voice behind me said, "You must be the new neighbor everyone's whispering about." I turned to see a sweet woman in her 70s bundled in a thick coat, holding a thermos. It smelled like hot chocolate. Her eyes were kind, her smile genuine, the total opposite of Denise Harrow. "I'm Harriet," she said, offering a mittened hand. "I live in the blue cabin over there. I heard about the broken bar incident last night. Just wanted to say sorry on behalf of the rest of us." Finally, a sane human. "I'm Lucas Sterling," I said, shaking her hand. "Honestly, I don't know what I did to deserve the welcome committee. I was just coming home from work." Harriet gave a soft sigh. "Oh, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. Denise has been different since her husband passed. Controlling, suspicious. It's been getting worse month by month. That explained a lot. Grief does strange things to people, but this was a whole different level. Has she always been the HOA president? I asked. Harriet nodded sadly. She took over about a year after Richard passed, said she wanted to preserve the neighborhood exactly how he would have wanted it. But Richard, he was a sweetheart, would have hated what she's become. She lowered her voice. She treats everyone like they're trespassers. But you're the first new face here in 2 years. That probably rattled her more than you know. We chatted a little longer. Harriet gave me the rundown on some of the other neighbors, and I quickly picked up on something. Denise had basically made herself queen of the HOA, and nobody dared challenge her reign. By the time I got back to the cabin, when I got back to the cabin, 3 more emails had landed in my inbox. Email number 15 really stood out. Final warning. All community rules must be followed. Non-compliance within 24 hours will lead to serious consequences. Serious consequences: a broken bar for parking 2 inches too close to the curb. That's when it truly hit me. This wasn't just obsession. This might be something deeper. Something genuinely unhinged. And then I remembered the way her face changed when she saw my federal ID. That raw, honest fear. This wasn't just about HOA rules anymore. There was something else going on, and like it or not, I was caught in the middle of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Whether it was the tension or just the strangeness of being back after 6 months, I found myself staring out the window around 11:30 p.m. What I saw made my skin crawl. Denise was outside, creeping around the vacant lot between our houses near the lake. She had a small flashlight in one hand and what looked like a folded piece of paper in the other. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and clearly intended to avoid drawing attention. This wasn't someone taking a casual night stroll. She was searching for something. She kept glancing at the paper. Maybe a map? Then would shine her light at the ground, take a few steps, repeat. I watched for nearly 20 minutes. It was clear she believed something important was buried out there. Her pace got faster, more frantic. This wasn't the behavior of a nosy neighbor anymore. This was someone who was terrified, a broken bar, and desperate. I started to wonder, was all this harassment just a cover, a way to keep me distracted, off balance, while she hunted for whatever it was out there in the dark? The next morning, I opened my inbox to find email number 18. Violation notice. Excessive light visible through windows during quiet hours disturbs neighborhood peace. She was now accusing me of a broken bar looking out the window. At that point, I seriously considered selling the cabin. I'd bought the place to escape stress, not step into a full-blown psychological chess match. But then I remembered what Harriet had told me. Nobody stood up to Denise anymore, and maybe that was exactly why she thought she could bully anyone into submission. That evening, while I was cooking, I noticed her outside again, but this time, she had a new piece of gear, a handheld device that looked like a metal detector. She was sweeping the same area as before, only this time her movements were sharper, more methodical. Whatever she thought was hidden there, she was convinced it existed, and judging by her increasingly frantic demeanor, she felt she was running out of time. That's when I realized, this had nothing to do with HOA rules. She wasn't just trying to be controlling, she was guarding a secret, a real one. Something valuable, and for some reason, she thought I might ruin her chances of finding it. The next morning, I received an email that showed me, urgent, community home meeting tonight at 7 p.m. Subject, critical violations, a mandatory attendance required. This wasn't just another passive-aggressive email. This was her going full scale, taking our dispute public. And I had no doubt this wasn't going to be a warm neighborhood welcome. What was she planning to say? That I was a threat because I arrived home late? That my porch light was some kind of atmospheric menace? I should have seen this escalation coming. I spent the entire day preparing. I printed off every document I had, my deed, mortgage, federal credentials, anything that could prove I wasn't some intruder. But truthfully, I didn't know what I was walking into. I'd never been to a community meeting before. I didn't know if this would be a calm discussion or some kind of public trial with Denise as prosecutor, judge, and jury. I kept telling myself I was probably overthinking it, but deep down, I knew this was serious. At 6:45 p.m., I walked over to the small community center by the lake. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Inside, The tension was immediate. 8 people sat scattered around in folding chairs. All eyes turned toward me the moment I stepped in. Most of their faces were unfamiliar, curious, cautious, a little suspicious. I spotted Harriet, who gave me a warm, reassuring smile. At least I wasn't completely alone. At the front of the room, behind a plastic card table turned makeshift podium, stood Denise Harrow. Gone was the robe from the other night. Tonight, she was dressed like a Fortune 500 CEO, a navy suit, pearls, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. This was not the woman who had been crawling through dirt with a flashlight. "Good evening," she began, that same authoritative edge in her voice from our first phone call. "Thank you all for attending on such short notice. We're facing a matter of significant importance to our community." She pointed straight at me. "As most of you know, someone new has moved into the Sterling cabin. While we're always happy to welcome newcomers, there have been a number of troubling incidents that raise serious concerns about our neighborhood's safety and peace." Troubling incidents? I hadn't done anything but come home and try to sleep, but she was just getting warmed up. "First," she announced, lifting a thick bundle of papers and no doubt the emails she'd been sending. "There have been numerous violations of our agreed standards: improper vehicle placement, excessive lighting, neglecting property maintenance as outlined in our bylaws." I didn't even flinch. I knew what this was really about. "But more concerning," she continued, "is Mr. Sterling's lifestyle. His behavior is secretive. He arrives at unusual hours, a broken bar. No one here really knows what he does," Denise continued, her tone sharp and polished. "And the way he comes and goes, it doesn't align with the peaceful routines of our community." I sat there thinking, really? My job makes me suspicious because I don't broadcast my daily itinerary to the entire neighborhood? That's flattering in a very weird way, but also totally insane. And then she threw down her trump card. "In addition," she said dramatically, "when I approached Mr. Sterling to discuss these concerns, he became aggressive and dismissive. He suggested that, due to his government ties, he had special privileges and didn't need to follow the same rules as everyone else." The room went absolutely silent. Every pair of eyes locked onto me. That's when I realized what she was doing. She was painting me as the classic arrogant fed-up, the kind of guy who thought he was above the law and didn't care about the people around him. It was manipulative via broken bar, but clever, because it played right into people's existing fears: government power, surveillance, authority without accountability. And worst of all, it was working. I saw one board member lean in and whisper to the person next to them. Another neighbor narrowed their eyes at me. Even Harriet looked momentarily unsure. Denise had clearly been laying the groundwork for this story for days, maybe even weeks. And now she was delivering it to a room full of people who barely knew me. I knew I had to respond, but I also knew I had to be careful. I couldn't afford to come off as defensive or hostile. That would only confirm everything she was accusing me of. So I stood slowly, steady and composed. "Thank you, Mrs. Harrow," I began, voice calm. "If I may, I'd like to clear up a few misunderstandings." The room was so quiet, I could hear the faint buzz of the overhead lights. "My name is Lucas Sterling. I'm the legal owner of the Sterling cabin. I work in federal security." "Yes, but I assure you, that doesn't mean I think I'm above any community rules." I looked around, meeting eyes where I could. "I understand there are concerns about regulations. I'm more than willing to address any real issues, but let me be absolutely clear. I've never been aggressive or threatening. My goal is to be a good neighbor, nothing more." I could feel some of the tension begin to dissolve. People's expressions softened. But Denise wasn't done. "What about the surveillance equipment?" she snapped, rising to her feet. "I've detected electronic devices on your property, devices that could be used to spy on us." This was where things took a turn. I hadn't installed any surveillance gear. I had motion sensor lights and the basic cabin security features, that's it. I took a deep breath. "Mrs. Harrow, I can assure you I haven't installed anything unusual. If you're picking up signals, it's most likely just my lights or standard security tech built into the property." Then I paused at a broken bar and decided to push back. "If safety is such a concern, I'd be happy to share some basic home security tips, maybe even do a quick walkthrough of the area to identify any real vulnerabilities." The effect was immediate. Denise's body jerked like she'd been hit with an electric shock. "No, that's not a broken bar, that's not necessary," she stammered. "This neighborhood is perfectly secure. We don't need any kind of a broken bar assessment." Everyone turned to look at her. Her reaction was too defensive. I realized right then, I had hit a nerve. She wasn't just paranoid about being watched, she was terrified that someone might actually look too closely at something she was hiding. The meeting wrapped up awkwardly after that. Denise hurried to collect her stack of papers, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Residents slowly trickled out, murmuring to each other. As I turned to leave, one of the board members approached me. "Lucas," he said quietly, "I want to say I'm sorry. Denise has been a broken bar intense lately. Most of us just let her run things because it's easier than arguing. But tonight, the way she reacted to your offer, that was weird. Really weird." I thanked him and walked home, but my mind wouldn't settle. This wasn't just about community rules. Denise wasn't trying to manage me, she was trying to keep me away from something. And now I couldn't help but wonder if I should actually start looking. The next morning, I was halfway through making coffee when I heard a soft knock at the door. Not the angry pounding I'd come to associate with Denise. This was gentle, hesitant. I checked the peephole. It was her, but she looked nothing like the woman who ran last night's meeting. No suit, no pearls, just torn jeans, unbrushed hair, and tired eyes that hadn't seen sleep in a while. When I opened the door, she looked up at me with something I'd never seen on her face before. Genuine fear, a broken bar, and desperation. "Lucas, a broken bar, can I come in?" she asked quietly. "I need to talk to you." This wasn't the woman who'd called the police on me. This was someone unraveling. I paused, unsure what was about to happen. Was this some kind of trap, a setup, or was I seeing a genuine breakdown in front of me? Something in her eyes, her body language, it felt real. "Sure," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." Denise moved past me and sank into the couch, gripping a tissue like it was the only thing anchoring her. Her hands trembled, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely holding together. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm truly sorry, for the phone call, a broken bar, the email, a broken bar, everything that happened at the meeting. I know I've acted irrationally, like I was losing it." Tears filled her eyes, and for the first time, I saw someone completely different from the woman who had spent days trying to tear me down. Ever since Richard passed away, a broken bar, I've been falling apart. He died 3 years ago, and since then, I've become paranoid, controlling. I see danger in everything. I assume the worst in everyone. It's not fair to you, to anyone in this neighborhood. I hadn't expected this. Not after all the accusations, the constant pressure, the public shaming. And yet here she was apologizing, admitting she needed help. "I understand," I said gently. "Losing someone that close changes everything. It can push people into places they never thought they'd go. But Denise, broken bar, the emails, the calls to the police, the things you said in that meeting, they were way over the line." She nodded quickly, dabbing at her eyes. I know, I've been awful, but after Richard, I became terrified of losing anything else. This community, this place, it's the only part of him I have left. When you moved in, and I didn't know you, I panicked. I thought if I could just keep everything exactly the same, a broken bar, maybe he wouldn't feel so gone." Her voice shifted. It became more urgent, a kind of pleading. "Can you forgive me? Please, just let all of this go. No more complaints. No more warnings. I'll even step down from the HOA if that's what it takes. Just please, broken bar, don't look into anything. Don't go checking into our security or poking around the neighborhood. Please." And there it was again, that overwhelming fear, not of me, but of discovery. Her apology was heartfelt. Yes, but it was also driven by something deeper. She wasn't just sorry for being difficult. She was afraid, deeply, visibly afraid that I'd uncover something. "Denise," I said carefully, "I'm not investigating anything. I came here to relax, to live quietly. I don't care about neighborhood politics or people's personal business." But my answer didn't calm her. "But a broken bar, you talked about checking for activity, doing safety assessments. You work for the government. You have tools, access, systems. You could start looking into things, and you don't know what that might uncover." Her voice was rising again. Her eyes were wide, frantic. "You don't get it. There are things here that should stay buried. Things that should never be brought up again. That phrase stuck in my mind, things that should stay buried, and I didn't think she meant it metaphorically, not after what I'd seen at the strange behavior, the late-night activity. This felt literal. When her desperate approach didn't work, she changed tactics. Her expression hardened. Just like that, I was looking at the old Denise at the HOA enforcer, the woman who had called the cops on me for moving furniture at night. "You work in federal security," she said coldly. "You of all people should know that some things are better left untouched. There are events from this neighborhood's past that, if exposed, could create serious problems for a lot of people. Important people, people who don't want outsiders poking around." My thoughts were racing. What was she talking about? Important people? What past? This was supposed to be a peaceful mountain community, not the setting for some kind of buried scandal. What secrets, Denise? I asked. What are you so afraid I'll find? That only made her more agitated. You don't need to know, she snapped. You just need to sell that cabin and leave. Find another place to live, somewhere quieter. This place a broken bar, this neighborhood a broken bar. It's not right for you. She sprang up from the couch, pacing the living room with a wild energy, like she was both trapped and threatening. I'm trying to protect you, she insisted. Protect all of us. You just don't understand yet, but if you keep pressing, keep asking, keep sniffing around, there will be consequences. Real consequences. And just like that, she stormed out the door. I stood there frozen, heart pounding. Who exactly was I supposed to be afraid of? What was she trying so hard to hide? The next morning, I was shaken from sleep by the jarring rumble of heavy equipment, not a lawnmower, not a delivery truck. This was something else, something much bigger. I looked out the window and I looked out and saw a small excavator in the empty lot right next to my cabin. Denise was standing close by, clutching what appeared to be the same paper she carried during her late-night wanderings. A construction crew was hard at work, digging a deep hole right along the property line, while she supervised every movement with intense focus. This definitely wasn't some routine neighborhood repair. I quickly got dressed and headed over. Denise, what's going on? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady even though irritation simmered beneath the surface. Waterline maintenance, she said flatly, not bothering to meet my eyes. A leak showed up in one of our inspections. The team's here to fix it before it causes flooding. But I knew better. I'd seen enough construction projects in my life to recognize this wasn't about a water line. The digging crew wasn't following any utility markings. They didn't have the right tools. And they weren't measuring or scanning like professionals would. No, they weren't repairing, they were searching, and they were using Denise's hand-drawn map as a guide. I didn't report any leak, I said, watching the workers dig into the frozen soil. And I haven't seen any signs of water damage. She finally looked up at me. I could see the strain etched across her face. It was a standard HOA inspection, she said quietly. We're required to check for risks before they become problems. But her explanation didn't line up. HOA inspections don't involve private excavation, and if there was a leak, the water company would handle it, not some crew she clearly hired herself. I stood there, watching her orchestrate a chaotic dig like some kind of desperate treasure hunt. That's when I had to ask myself, what would you do in my place? Stay silent, or dig into the truth? Because this wasn't about pipes or neighborhood infractions. She was trying to uncover something she absolutely had to find before I did. And after all her cryptic warnings and talk of consequences, I was beginning to believe there was more at stake than a homeowner dispute. As I watched her urge the crew to go deeper, I realized I couldn't keep brushing it off. I couldn't just be the peaceful neighbor anymore. It was time to shift gears. It was time to become the investigator. I called my lawyer and explained what was going on: property damage, harassment, suspicious activity. His advice was clear: document everything, demand a reason, and if she couldn't give one, go to court and get law enforcement involved. So I picked up my phone and called her directly. You have 24 hours to stop the digging and explain exactly what you're looking for, I said, my voice firm. If you don't, I'm filing a lawsuit and calling the police to open an investigation. There was a long, dragging silence on the other end. You can't do that, she finally whispered. Her voice trembled. You don't understand. This goes way beyond HOA drama. If you bring the police into this, people will get hurt. Powerful people. People who won't hesitate to make life difficult for you. I was done with the veiled threats. Then help me understand, I said. Tell me what's actually going on or I'm making that call. Another long pause. I could hear her shallow breathing through the phone. Yeah, broken bar, I can't tell you, she stammered. But please, please just sell the place and leave. It's for your own safety. Later that night, just before midnight, my phone rang again. It was Denise. She sounded completely changed, tired, broken, like someone carrying a burden too heavy for too long. Lucas, she said quietly, can you meet me at the dig site? I'll tell you everything. I can't keep living like this. It felt like a setup, but her voice didn't sound like someone laying a trap. It sounded like someone with nothing left to lose. I grabbed my flashlight and walked to the lot where the digging had been happening. The site looked abandoned, like the crew had vanished in a hurry, and there she was looking like a shell of herself. Same clothes from her apology visit, but now she seemed aged, drained. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes sunken, and in her hands, that same paper, crumpled and dirty, clutched like a lifeline. Thank you for coming, she said softly. I know you have every reason to walk away from this, but I'm going to tell you everything, the truth. I stood there, moonlight casting shadows across the disturbed ground, waiting as she unraveled the story that had brought her to the edge. Richard used to work for Mountain Resort Development, she began. They were stealing from federal contracts. Millions. He found out and started collecting evidence. And then a broken bar. He died. She looked down at the worn paper in her hand. It was 4 years ago. Richard discovered the company was siphoning off government funds. They faked documents, billed for projects that never existed, made up costs. It was massive fraud. This wasn't some petty neighborhood feud. This was high-level crime. Richard was a good man, she said, tears slipping down her face. He couldn't ignore it. He started copying files, putting together proof, building a case. But someone caught on. They threatened him. They followed him. And he knew if he went to the authorities, they'd come after me. She looked at me with hollow eyes, filled with fear and guilt. So, he took everything and put it all on a hard drive and buried it right here, in this lot. He gave me this map, told me if anything ever happened to him a broken bar I should use it to expose the truth. The puzzle was finally starting to form a picture. But then he died, I said, and she gave a faint nod. It was a heart attack, right at his desk, she said quietly. Doctors said it was stress-related. Her voice faded, but the doubt in her expression said more than words could. For the past 3 years, I've lived in constant fear, she continued. I've been terrified that if anyone at Mountain Resort Development suspected Richard had hidden evidence, they'd come after me next just to tie up loose ends. That flash drive is the only thing that can prove what he uncovered. Maybe it could even give some meaning to his death. I stood there in silence, looking at a woman who'd carried this weight alone for years. Her fear, her secrecy, the obsessive need to search it all made sense now. When you showed up, she said, her voice shaky, with your federal ID and your background in computer security, I thought. She let out a bitter laugh. I thought the government was already onto the fraud. I assumed you were sent to recover the evidence, or maybe to investigate me. She looked away. I was convinced you'd find what Richard buried, that I'd be labeled an accomplice, that I'd be arrested, or worse. Suddenly, everything clicked. Her paranoia, the stalking behavior, the frantic digging. She wasn't trying to hide anything from me. She was trying to survive what she believed was inevitable. I thought back to the bizarre neighbor stories I'd seen on Anna Drama Nest, None of them came close to this. Denise, I said softly, I had no idea. Honestly, I really am just a guy looking for a quiet place to unwind. I wasn't sent here to expose anything. I'm not after evidence. I just wanted to stop feeling like a criminal in my own home. She looked at me with teary eyes, a fragile blend of relief and disbelief washing over her. But now you know, she whispered. Now you understand what I've been hiding. And I still haven't found it. It's been 3 years, and I still don't know exactly where he buried it. I glanced around at the churned-up lot, the half-buried machinery, the remains of a desperate search. I felt something shift inside me, pity, maybe, or empathy. She hadn't just lost her husband, she'd been trapped in a nightmare ever since, haunted by what he left behind. As we stood in that cold, moonlit lot, I had to ask myself, would you walk away, or would you help if you were in my place? Yes, she'd made my life miserable for the past week. She'd called the police on me, harassed me with messages and threats. But for 3 years, she'd been living in terror, convinced powerful people were watching her, waiting. And now, seeing her like this, shattered, exhausted, finally telling the truth, I understood she might not be the villain after all. Maybe she was just another casualty of something far bigger than any of us realized. And maybe, whether I liked it or not, I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I called an emergency home meeting, but this time, it wasn't about defending myself. I came prepared with video of the illegal excavation, logs of her harassment, and a statement outlining her confession about the fraud and her husband's evidence. As the 8 residents filed into the community center, the mood was different. Denise sat quietly in a corner, smaller somehow. Gone was the controlling, sharp-eyed woman who once ruled the HOA with unchecked authority. What sat before us was someone broken by grief and guilt. Thank you all for coming, I began, standing at the front of the room. I know tensions have been high lately. I want to be honest with you all about what's really been happening here. I looked around at familiar faces of people who had once eyed me with suspicion. First, I want to address the accusations that were made against me. I have all the documentation confirming I legally own my property. I work for the federal government in computer security. I've followed every reasonable community rule and regulation. One of the board members, someone who had eagerly nodded along during Denise's previous complaints, shifted uncomfortably in their seat. But more importantly, I continued, I think it's time we talk about why Mrs. Harrow's strange behavior, I began, has been driven by deep personal trauma connected to her husband's passing. Unfortunately, that grief led to actions that were not only inappropriate but also disruptive to me and likely others. I pulled out my phone and played the video I had taken of footage clearly showing heavy machinery tearing up common community land without permits or HOA approval. This was organized entirely by Mrs. Harrow, I explained. She didn't notify the board or get consent. She told residents it was a water line repair. It wasn't. The room went silent. The truth hung heavy in the air. One of the same residents who had whispered about me at the initial meeting turned toward Denise in disbelief. Is this real, Denise? Did you seriously bring in a crew to dig up our property without informing anyone? Denise looked up briefly. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken with guilt. But she said nothing. It was Herina, the kind older woman who had tried to play peacekeeper, who finally spoke. Oh, Denise broken bar, why didn't you just ask for help? But Denise sat motionless, hands folded, eyes fixed on the floor. One of the board members, someone who had stood by her until now, couldn't hide his frustration. This crosses every line, he said firmly. As board members, we owe transparency and accountability to this community. We cannot let one person make decisions in secret and then lie about them. He turned toward the rest of the board. I propose we immediately remove Denise from her role as HOA president, and she should be responsible for the cost of repairing the damage. Another member seconded the motion, and the vote passed without hesitation. Denise abstained. Just like that, the control she once had vanished. I'll need some time, Denise said softly. I think it's time I left. Maybe start over somewhere far from here. A quiet discomfort settled over the group. The woman who had once ruled the HOA with an iron will could now barely lift her voice in a room she used to command. Despite everything she had put me through, I felt a surprising wave of sympathy. She hadn't just been difficult, she'd been tormented for years, and now that torment was collapsing around her, With Denise no longer in power, the neighborhood breathed again. Porch lights stayed on, packages didn't mysteriously disappear, people parked freely without fear of another violation notice, and new HOA president was elected within a week. His first announcement was a commitment to sensible, fair governance, dealing with actual community matters instead of policing people's routines. It felt like the neighborhood had emerged from a long storm. Denise was relocating to Arizona. Harriet mentioned she needed a clean break and a new beginning. I couldn't blame her. While I felt sorry for her, I was also relieved. Her time in charge had left everyone drained, always bracing for the next odd or angry email. I watched her from a distance as she boxed up her home. She kept her head down, avoided conversation. I couldn't help feeling conflicted. She had made life miserable, yes, but she had also suffered in ways none of us could fully grasp. The day before she left, I noticed her by the now ruined lot, holding that same tattered map. She stared at the ground where she had spent years digging for the truth her husband left behind. She looked utterly lost, like someone who had spent too long chasing shadows and finally realized they weren't real. Then she looked up and caught me watching. For a fleeting second, our eyes met. No anger, no fear, just exhaustion, and maybe a quiet acknowledgement that her long nightmare had come to a close. The next morning, I watched her car disappear down the road. The woman who'd once called 911 on me in the middle of the night, who'd bombarded me with messages and accusations, who'd turned this neighborhood upside down, was gone. At last, I had the peace I had originally come here for, but something lingered in my mind, an unease I couldn't quite name, because although Denise had left, the people who caused all of these, the ones behind the fraud, who pushed her husband to his death, were still out there. This didn't feel like the end. About 3 weeks later, as I was finally settling into the mountain retreat I dreamed of, quiet mornings, peaceful walks, no drama. I was cleaning up my inbox, deleting all the old warnings and conflict threads. That's when I found a message I'd forgotten. It was from Reed Keller, an old colleague who'd climbed the ranks and now served as director of the agency's security division. The subject line was simple: "Call me when you wrap up your Colorado assignment." That was the message Reed had left. I'd been so wrapped up in the whole chaos that I'd never circled back. But now, with things finally calming down, I picked up my phone and called. "Reed, it's Lucas Sterling. Sorry for the delay, it took me longer than expected. Life got complicated." Reed chuckled on the other end. "Lucas, I was wondering when you'd pop back up. Funny enough, those complications, they're exactly why I reached out." His tone was serious now. "This wasn't just a casual check-in." "What are you talking about?" I asked, a bit confused. "I know you took some time in Colorado, but word got around. Something about an incident with a local HOA president, a 911 call, someone tried to report your federal ID." I froze. "Well, how do you know about that?" "Come on, Lucas. Local police flagged it. They submitted a report about a federal agent getting harassed by an HOA resident. That file landed on my desk, and when I saw your name, I paid attention." He paused before continuing. "What impressed me most wasn't the report, it was how you handled it. You didn't misuse your credentials. You didn't escalate. You let things play out, kept it calm, and used smart judgment. That's rare." I was still trying to make sense of how neighborhood drama had turned into a government case study. "Reed, I wasn't trying to impress anyone," I said. "I just wanted to get some sleep without being falsely accused of breaking into my own place." "Exactly," he replied, his voice picking up energy. "You were under pressure, dealing with someone unstable, and you handled it better than most seasoned agents would have. No power plays, no threats, just level-headed leadership." Then he said something that changed everything. "That's exactly what we need." I raised an eyebrow. "Need for what?" "Our domestic security unit is expanding," he explained. "We're looking for leaders, people who can manage sensitive situations, coordinate with locals, spot threats early, and keep things from boiling over." He paused again. "Your experience in Colorado?" "That was basically a live-action evaluation. You showed you can diffuse tension, communicate effectively, and maintain integrity even when provoked. That's gold to us." I sat there in silence, absorbing the weight of his words. "Reed, I wasn't looking for a new job, I just wanted to enjoy my cabin in peace. But hear me out, he said. This role comes with a big promotion, a serious salary bump, and you'd be building a team from the ground up. You'd be safeguarding critical infrastructure, handling real threats, and working with communities nationwide. I found myself thinking back to the last few weeks, how I'd been thrown into chaos I never asked for and how I'd managed to navigate it. You caught a fraud case, Reed continued. You handled someone unwell. You did it all without incident reports or dragging anyone into a mess. That's the kind of leadership we need. He made it sound heroic, even though to me, it felt like survival. Still, I asked, what if I told you there's more to the Colorado mess than a difficult neighbor? What if there were real crimes behind it? That's even better, Reed replied instantly. If you can identify illegal activity while keeping your cover as a civilian, that's incredibly valuable. We need people who can think like that and see the danger before it blows up. I looked out at the calm lake just outside my cabin window. The peaceful retreat I had planned had somehow turned into the gateway to my biggest career step yet. This is a lot to take in, I told him. Can I have a day or two to think? But in my gut, I already knew, this was the work I'd always been drawn to. And apparently, I was already doing it without realizing. The next morning, as I stood by my packed car, I looked around one last time. Would you take it, if you were me? I thought. Of course I would. The cabin would stay my quiet getaway. But now, I had a new mission. I accepted Reed's offer. I was heading back to DC to lead a team focused on protecting critical systems and tackling domestic threats. As I packed the last bag into my car, I thought about the strange sequence of events that led here. A nosy neighbor, a midnight complaint, a buried drive, and now, a promotion that would reshape my entire career. I looked over at the empty lot where Denise had spent so much time digging and searching for her husband's secrets. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her fear of being investigated had created the perfect test of my own investigative skills. Her paranoia made me sharper. Her relentless attacks launched me forward. She tried to push me out, and in doing so, she pushed me upward. Maybe she had finally found some peace in Arizona. Maybe she'd let go of Richard's secrets at last. As I drove away, I had to laugh. If someone told me a run-in with a neighborhood Karen would lead to a career breakthrough, I'd never have believed it. But sometimes life throws you unexpected tests, and if you pay attention, they can lead to the biggest opportunities. Maybe Denise and I both ended up exactly where we needed to be. And if you're still here, first off, thanks for sticking with me. I'll leave you with this. Trust your instincts. Sometimes what seems like petty small-town drama or just another grumpy neighbor or a broken bar might actually be the start of something deeper. I didn't mean to get involved. I didn't plan to fix anything. But life doesn't always ask for permission. And hey, if this story hit home or made you look at your own HOA a little differently, go ahead and tap that like button, drop a comment, or subscribe to Anna Drama Nest. I read everything you share, and honestly, your stories are what keep this going. If you want to go the extra mile and support the channel, hit that little thanks button down below. No pressure, just if you're feeling generous. Either way, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.